Walter Reeves had constructed vast empires, finalized billion-dollar transactions, and moved forward without hesitation, until the moment he encountered a homeless woman holding two small girls on a snowy street corner. He paused for a brief moment. That moment transformed everything. Snowflakes danced in the air like delicate shards of glass as the black SUV glided down Fifth Avenue. The windows were shaded, protecting Walter Reeves from the frigid reality beyond. Within the confines of the vehicle, an oppressive quiet enveloped the space. There was no melody to fill the air, no ringing phones to break the stillness. Only the steady thrum of the engine and the soft, rhythmic click of the turn signal punctuated the moment as the driver eased to a stop at the red light. Walter rested his head against the window, his breath creating a mist on the glass. He had just exited yet another boardroom, yet another interminable meeting focused on growth, margins, and global expansion. An ordinary day in his fast-paced, luxurious existence. Yet, something drew his attention. At the crossroads, just past the pedestrian lane, a young woman stood poised. She appeared to be no older than 30. Her coat barely offered any warmth against the sharp January chill, and her scarf appeared as if it had been lovingly crafted long ago, showing signs of daily wear and tear since its creation. She stood firmly, keeping the two little girls snug against her sides. The kids were trembling with cold. One of them was without gloves. One of them was rubbing her hands together and blowing into them, her nose a vivid shade of red from the chill. They both sported matching pink hats, the sole fresh detail about their appearance. Walter sensed a tightness constricting his chest. Uncertain of the reason, he instinctively leaned forward and tapped the driver's shoulder. "Halt the vehicle." The driver cast a quick look in the rearview mirror. "Excuse me, sir?" "Just stop," Walter insisted, his tone more resolute. The SUV glided to a stop at the curb, and before the driver had a chance to open the door, Walter had already emerged into the snowy landscape. The chill struck him with a sharpness, yet he brushed it aside. He approached the woman with deliberate slowness, each step measured and careful, a sense of uncertainty hanging in the air. Perhaps it stemmed from a sense of remorse, perhaps a sense of wonder, perhaps a different concept altogether. She caught sight of him approaching and instinctively drew the girls nearer, her body tightening as if bracing for a shout, or worse, a call for someone to escort them away. "I'm not here to disturb you," Walter said, raising his hands in a calming manner. Are you okay?" The woman paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Her eyes held a cautious weariness, a fatigue that spoke of battles fought, yet they remained unyielding. "We're fine, thank you," she responded softly. Her voice was raspy, reminiscent of someone who had refrained from speaking for days. The two girls gazed up at him, their eyes wide and filled with curiosity. Silence enveloped them. One grasped her mother's leg tightly, while the other stood with her hand in her mouth, observing him as if he were an unusual creature. Walter surveyed his surroundings. The street was lively yet not overwhelming. They went unnoticed by everyone else. How could they remain blind to his perspective? "You don't seem well," he said gently. "The girls are shivering from the cold." She tensed just a bit. "We've grown accustomed to it. This shouldn't be the norm for anyone," he remarked, shaking his head. He cast his gaze upon the girls once more. Something about them pulled at him, resonating deeper than mere compassion. A sudden spark of familiarity that felt utterly perplexing. Perhaps it's their eyes, their stance. A peculiar discomfort unfurled within his chest, and for a fleeting moment, he found himself gasping for air. "Listen," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "I'm not aiming to upset you. However, a cafe is conveniently located just across the street. Allow me to bring you and the children inside. Find something comforting to savor."
No attachments.
She took her time before responding. Her jaw was clenched. Her expression was a battleground of pride and fear. Then one of the girls emitted a faint cough, and the sound appeared to shatter her composure. "Simply for the purpose of eating," she remarked. Walter gave a slight nod. "Simply for sustenance." As they started to traverse the street side by side, the snow cascading down more intensely, Walter remained blissfully unaware that this seemingly mundane moment was on the brink of transforming his entire understanding of existence. As they crossed the threshold, the inviting warmth of the cafe enveloped them like a comforting embrace. The windows were misted, a result of the warmth within clashing with the frigid air outside, while the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread enveloped them in a comforting embrace. Walter stood by the door, allowing the woman and her 2 daughters to enter, observing their hesitant, delicate movements as they stepped inside. The younger girl wobbled slightly on the mat, and her sister instinctively extended a hand to support her. They were silent, an unsettling stillness for kids of their age. Silence enveloped the scene, with no laughter, inquiries, or grievances, only wide eyes absorbing the strange radiance and warmth. A server welcomed them at the entrance with a courteous smile, exuding curiosity yet maintaining a professional demeanor that refrained from probing further. Walter lifted his hand and stated plainly, "A table for 4, in a cozy spot." The server guided them to a cozy booth tucked away in the corner, beside a small radiator that emitted a gentle hum. Walter eased himself into a seat on one side, while the woman and the girls settled in across from him. The girls huddled near their mother, lingering in uncertainty about whether they could truly let their guard down. He removed his coat and draped it over the back of the seat, then signaled for the server to bring the menus. As they waited, he glanced over at the woman, realizing for the first time just how slender she appeared beneath her coat. Not merely slender, but exhausted. Her face bore remnants of a beauty that lingered, obscured by the weight of fatigue and struggle. Her eyes were keen, wary, and defensive, reminiscent of someone who had discovered early on that compassion frequently carried a hidden cost. "May I ask what your name is?" Walter inquired softly. She paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Sarah." He nodded with deliberation, the name echoing softly in his thoughts. "What about the girls?" "Lily and Sky," she responded, her voice soft yet more distinct now. She gazed at them for a moment, her expression softening, before adding, "They're 6. He remarked on the beauty of the names. He glanced at the twins once more, still nestled together, their cheeks now rosy not only from the chill but also from the growing warmth of the cafe. "Is it acceptable for them to order whatever they desire?" Sarah paused once more, her pride intertwined with gratitude, revealing that accepting assistance was not a simple task for her. Yet, upon noticing Lily's gaze lingering on the chalkboard menu, filled with an unspoken desire, she offered a subtle nod. Walter beamed and signaled to the server. 2 hot chocolates, he declared, with additional marshmallows, and whatever they desire to consume, anything from sandwiches to soup. He cast a fleeting look at Sarah. "And for you as well." The girls brightened at the mention of hot chocolate, and for the first time, a glimmer of joy danced across their faces. Silence lingered between them, yet Lily reached out softly, pulling at her mother's sleeve as she directed her gaze toward the image of a grilled cheese sandwich on the menu. Sky decided on tomato soup. Sarah offered a soft thank you to Walter, and for a brief moment, the atmosphere around them became still. Once unfamiliar, now on the cusp of camaraderie, just 2 souls united by an enigmatic force they have yet to comprehend. The meal arrived promptly, hot and aromatic. The girls plunged in eagerly. Their hunger was evident, as it seemed they hadn't enjoyed a warm meal in days. Walter made an effort to avert his gaze, yet he found himself unable to turn away. The manner in which they grasped their spoons with slender, gentle fingers, the way their eyes met to ensure equal portions, it was both poignant and exquisite simultaneously. He told Sarah that she claimed to be accustomed to the cold. "How long have you been out in that place?" She hesitated before responding. She sipped her coffee, brought by the server, and gazed out the window, contemplating how much to disclose. After a few weeks, she finally spoke up. "We found ourselves in a shelter, but it has now closed for repairs. Since then, our search for another has been ongoing." Walter experienced an unsettling heaviness in his chest. He was a figure immersed in vast fortunes, orchestrating phone calls that swayed financial landscapes, possessing towering edifices in the skyline. And yet, mere steps from one of his buildings, a woman and her 2 children were left to endure the biting cold. He inquired softly, "No family? Not anymore?" She responded, her tone strained. "My parents departed a few years back. Only child. Only one." Walter gave a slow, deliberate nod. He refrained from probing deeper, even as every instinct urged him to uncover the hidden layers of the narrative. Much more. The girls were almost done with their meal now. Sky let out a soft, drowsy yawn, while Lily nestled against her mother's side, her eyes fluttering with fatigue. Sarah enveloped them in her embrace, and for the first time since their arrival, she appeared less like an outsider and more like a comforting presence from their past. Walter experienced an unusual tug in his stomach. He felt an elusive pull, a deepening awareness that there was something significant about this woman and her daughters, exceeding what is necessary for a fleeting act of kindness. Beyond what reason can articulate, a bond began to take shape in the stillness. Upon their visages, in a realm of silence, he cast a final glance at the girls. Their expressions, the contours of their eyes, the way they smiled despite their weariness, began to evoke a haunting sense of familiarity. He attempted to dismiss it, yet the thought remained in the recesses of his mind, a faint whisper just beyond his grasp. Unbeknownst to him, this was merely the start of something much larger. The cafe was starting to settle into a serene hush. The lunch rush had subsided, leaving just a handful of tables still in use. Businessmen engrossed in their laptops, an elderly couple savoring a slice of pie, and a young woman absorbed in her reading by the window. Yet, in the corner booth, the passage of time felt uniquely altered. The twins had completed their meal and now nestled beside their mother, their stomachs satisfied and their eyelids drooping with a deep, comforting drowsiness that only the embrace of warmth and security could provide. Lily rested her head on Sarah's lap, her thumb softly touching her lower lip, as Sky absent-mindedly traced the rim of her cup with a delicate finger. Walter observed them quietly, lost in thought, not gazing, not from courtesy, but because there was something about them that disturbed him in a manner he couldn't quite grasp. It wasn't merely pity or concern. He had witnessed hardship firsthand, had penned donations to shelters, hospitals, and youth centers. Yet this was unlike anything else. This was not far away. This was not an experience he could simply leave behind. It would linger, haunting him. Their expressions were striking. He gazed at Lily and Sky, truly observing them. Behind their features lay an intriguing reflection of himself, a delicate echo of his own essence. The contour of their noses, their eyebrows arched just a touch when they concentrated. Their shared glances before reaching a decision mirrored the moments he once had with his younger brother, moments now tinged with the weight of loss. His heart raced, and he reclined in the booth, attempting to sweep the thought aside. It was absurd. Just a mere coincidence, nothing beyond that. Countless little girls filled the world. He was merely conjuring visions, draping feelings over the fabric of reality. Yet, as he cast another look their way, the facade of denial began to fracture. He glanced at Sarah, who had caught the change in his demeanor. She inclined her head just a bit, a blend of caution and intrigue evident in her demeanor. "May I inquire about something personal?" Walter spoke, his voice dropping to a softer tone. Sarah nodded slowly, with a hint of caution. "When did you mention their birth date?" "On April 6th, she responded promptly, just as any devoted mother might. 6 years prior. In Walter's mind, the room swayed ever so slightly. He paused, unable to respond right away. He calculated swiftly, as if it were second nature. 6 years. That would be the year 2019. Springtime. It coincided almost perfectly with the last moment he had encountered Sarah Hunt, the woman he had cherished with a fervor that was both wild and consuming, only to lose her just as swiftly. They had shared 6 months in Boston, immersed in their projects, engaging in late-night conversations, and experiencing a connection he had yet to find again. They had clashed one night fiercely. He was bound for Zurich on a flight for a deal that simply couldn't wait. She expressed that she was unable to keep up. He departed, believing he would resolve matters at a later time. Yet upon his return she had vanished. No note, no communication, no evidence. He searched for her, but her number had been disconnected. The apartment stood devoid of life. Friends mentioned that she had relocated from the city. In the end, he managed to persuade himself that she had no desire to be discovered. He observed Sarah in that moment, her fingers softly caressing Lily's hair, the graceful line of her jaw, the subtle power reflected in her stance. Her features bore a resemblance to the Sarah he once knew, yet time had undeniably transformed her. The passage of time had etched lines of worry on her face and woven strands of silver into her hair. Yet those eyes remained unchanged. "You resided in Boston, correct?" he inquired with a measured tone, apprehensive about the response. Her body became rigid. For the first time since they had taken their seats, she met his eyes directly, and there was an edge to her look, a clarity that revealed she understood precisely what he was inquiring about. "Indeed," she replied, her tone soft yet unwavering. "Once upon a time." Walter felt a tightness in his throat. In an instant he lost all sensation in his hands. The table's edges, the cafe's sounds, the radiator's warmth, all of it faded into the periphery. He parted his lips, only to seal them once more. His throat felt parched. "Sarah Hunt?" he uttered at last, a hint of incredulity in his voice. She stood still. "You're Sarah Hunt." Her gaze locked onto him, eyes wide and jaw set, breath caught in her throat, spoke volumes before a single word escaped her lips. "I was," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I remain so. Yet I had my doubts about whether you would recall." Walter gazed at her, the reality washing over him in relentless surges. The young women, the timeline, the disappearing act. It was intentional. It was no mere coincidence. Her absence was not a matter of choice. And those little girls sleeping beside her weren't merely unfamiliar faces. He felt an inexplicable bond with them. They were his beloved daughters. He was rendered speechless. He was utterly immobilized. He remained seated, dazed, as the burden of 6 lost years descended upon him like a gentle yet oppressive snowfall. Walter remained motionless, the leather of the booth pressing against his back, as if it were an anchor, holding him firmly in place. The world beyond the cafe moved with its usual cadence. Vehicles glided past, pedestrians strolled by wrapped in layers of warmth. Yet within these walls time seemed to stand still. The buzz of chatter enveloping them dwindled to a faint echo as his thoughts struggled to grasp the reality of what Sarah had just revealed. Lily and Sky, his daughters, these girls. For 6 years, he had existed in a state of oblivion, oblivious to the fact that a fragment of his being lingered on a New York sidewalk, trembling and seeking refuge. He gazed at them once more, now resting peacefully next to their mother, their tiny faces serene in a manner that only follows a prolonged stretch of unease. They had dined, they were cozy, and for the moment they experienced a sense of security. Yet beneath that tranquility lay a truth that unsettled him. They had endured hardship. They had experienced the biting chill, the gnawing hunger, the gripping fear. And he was unaware. He was not present. Walter faced Sarah again, grappling with the perfect expression. Thoughts swirled in his mind like a tempest, intertwined and chaotic. Why she had gone, why she hadn't confided in him, why she had vanished. Yet, when he locked eyes with her once more, the answers eluded him. He witnessed suffering, the type of anguish that lingers, sinking further into the soul with each passing moment. "You need to tell me," he said at last, his voice quiet yet filled with urgency. "What was the reason for not reaching out to me? Why didn't you inform me of their existence?" Sarah sat straight, her hands hovering gently over the girls. Her jaw clenched, her gaze unwavering yet brimming with an intense emotion. "I made an effort," she remarked. "Oh, Walter, I really gave it my all." He blinked, a look of bewilderment crossing his face. "You believe I simply disappeared without explanation?" she pressed on, her voice trembling, yet she struggled to maintain her composure. After you departed for Zurich, I discovered I was expecting just 2 weeks later. Fear gripped me, yet I stood prepared to share my truth with you. I made the call. I sent a message. Messages have been left. However, it was your assistant who picked up the phone, the one with the distinct accent. Mark. Walter's expression grew somber. What was his statement? Sarah inhaled deeply, as though compelling herself to revisit the moment. He mentioned that you had moved on, that you wished to distance yourself from me. You mentioned that you were involved with someone else and that I should honor your wishes by not reaching out to you again. Walter experienced a chilling sensation enveloping him, one that penetrated far beyond the frigid air beyond the walls. Mark had stood by his side for years. Reliable, faithful. At least that was his belief. Initially, I found it hard to accept what he said. She went on. However, I soon found myself without any replies. My emails were returned. Your number has been updated. I composed a letter, yet it was returned as undeliverable. I believed you despised me. I never knew, Walter whispered, almost as if the words were meant for his own ears rather than hers. I haven't come across any of that before. I promise you, Sarah, I didn't receive a message, a call, or anything at all. Had I been aware, he was unable to complete the sentence. He found himself at a loss for words. No words could restore the time he had lost. I didn't have anyone else, Sarah said, her voice softer now. My mother passed away a month prior to the girl's arrival. My father was no longer present. I was unable to hire a lawyer. I juggled 2 jobs until my pregnancy became noticeable. One by one, they released me. Finding work can be quite challenging when expecting twins and lacking health insurance. Walter felt a churn in his stomach. She continued, I sold everything I owned. I transitioned from one small room to another. Once they arrived, I took on the night shifts, tidying up offices. I took the necessary steps to fulfill my obligations. I kept your identity a secret from them. I wanted to ensure they never felt that their father didn't care for them. Her voice carried no accusation, just a deep sense of weariness. She had no intention of making him feel guilty. She was simply expressing the truth. Walter gazed at his hands. Empires had been constructed by them.
Secured contract worth millions.
Clutched elegant champagne flutes at lavish galas. Yet they had never embraced his daughters. Not a single time. I ought to have discovered you, he whispered. I ought to have searched more thoroughly. You put in some effort, didn't you? She inquired, her tone almost tender. He gave a slight nod. Upon my return from Zurich, I found you had already departed. I found it unclear. Your presence was completely undetectable. I believed you had already decided. They lingered in quietude for a brief spell, the heaviness of their individual sorrows settling in the space around them. It was peculiar. Neither of them had wished for separation, yet fate had woven its threads to ensure it occurred regardless. Sarah cast her eyes downward at the girls. They are wonderful children, she remarked gently. Intelligent, compassionate. They are worthy of so much more than what I have been able to provide. Walter gazed at her, recognizing not a mere stranger but the woman he had once cherished, the woman he still could potentially love, even if he was hesitant to acknowledge it. Her strength, her determination, her steadfast loyalty to her children, it remained unaltered. What had transformed was all that surrounded it. You're no longer by yourself, he murmured softly. She gazed at him, her face a mask of mystery. For the first time, she simply listened, refraining from arguing or dismissing his words. She gazed at him, weary yet filled with hope. In that instant, a transformation occurred. Not all was absolved. Not all wounds have mended. Yet the barrier separating them had begun to fracture. And through that crack, a fresh possibility was starting to emerge. The sky beyond had taken on a somber hue. Through the misty cafe windows, the city lights started to twinkle, illuminating the snow-draped streets with a gentle amber hue. Within the space, the warmth held its ground. Yet at the booth in the corner, the emotional atmosphere plunged into more profound depths. The tempest of revelation had subsided, yet in its aftermath lingered a weightier presence, sorrow. Not the type that bursts forth, but rather the one that settles deep, silent and heavy, infusing each breath with unvoiced reflections. Walter reclined in his chair, fingers intertwined on the table before him, his gaze drifting aimlessly into the distance. His thoughts had ceased their frantic pace, now meandering through 6 years lost to him, years he could never retrieve. The sight of those two small girls nestled in a booth, peacefully slumbering, unaware of the man sitting opposite them, replayed endlessly in his thoughts. He couldn't escape the images of their faces, their small hands, their coordinated hats, and the undeniable reality that they belonged to him. Opposite him, Sarah remained silent. The expression on her face had mellowed, yet it remained present. She maintained her posture with great strain, reminiscent of someone who has endured the solitude of standing alone for an extended period. Her fingers glided softly through Lily's hair, and while her eyes remained on the girls, Walter sensed that her focus was divided, a portion of her still present in the moment, and another part adrift in the weight of her recent revelations. "Why didn't you seek assistance?" he finally murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no one to turn to," she answered, her gaze fixed on the ground. "You had me," he said quickly, then paused. "Or at least you were supposed to." Sarah looked at him now, truly looked, and Walter noticed the sharpness in her eyes once more. Not anger, but the ache of a memory that had never quite mended. "I was unaware of that," she remarked. "I believed you wished for my departure." He breathed out, a sense of guilt constricting his chest. "Mark made that decision on my behalf. I wasn't even aware that he had talked to you. He seemed so confident," she remarked, as if he had rehearsed this moment. Walter's stomach twisted in knots. It wasn't merely betrayal. It was a calculated act of sabotage. Mark had always wielded control, forever standing as the gatekeeper. Yet Walter had placed his faith in him without question. Now, that faith bore a price far exceeding any financial transaction. "I let him go 6 months after you left," he whispered. "He began to intrude into my personal life. I was unaware. It never crossed my mind to link the two." Sarah nodded subtly, not as an act of forgiveness but as a gesture of comprehension. "It no longer holds any significance," she remarked. "What's done is done." Yet deep down they understood that this was a falsehood. The past held significance. It held significance for the two little girls who had never experienced their father's presence. It held significance for the man who had missed out on 6 years with them. It held significance for the woman who had nurtured them alone, believing she had been left behind. The damage was undeniable, and the scars were profound. Walter leaned in closer. "It does matter. Perhaps I can't mend the past, but I can be present in this moment. If you allow me to." Sarah's gaze wavered, suspended between a glimmer of hope and a shield of self-preservation. "You don't owe us anything, Walter." He shook his head in refusal. "It's not about what I am obligated to give. It's about what has eluded me, what I desire. I desire to understand them better. I want them to understand who I am." Sarah's voice carried a soft yet resolute tone. "They are completely unaware of your presence." "In that case, allow me to introduce myself," he replied. "Allow me to clarify." She paused, then cast her gaze down at the girls. "It's more complicated than that. I have dedicated my entire existence to shielding them from disappointment. They've inquired about their father, yet I've never found the words to share without shattering their spirits. I didn't want to deceive, yet I also wished to spare them from feeling rejected." Walter shut his eyes briefly, attempting to envision the experience of navigating those inquiries, suppressing her anguish while offering solace to them. The idea of them questioning their father's love, unaware that he didn't even know they were alive, was nearly unbearable. "I can't erase the hurt," he said softly, "but I can begin to be here now. I am capable of being present. I can demonstrate my desire to be included in their lives." Sarah paused before responding. She turned her gaze to the window, observing the snow gently accumulating on the sidewalk. At last, she remarked, they possess a certain sensitivity. More clever than they appear. Breaking a promise can cause more harm than you might think. I get it, he replied. I'm not going anywhere. She turned back to him, examining his face as if she were rediscovering it anew. The defined contours of his jaw, the silver strands in his hair, the fatigue reflected in his eyes. He appeared changed from 6 years prior, yet the essence of the man remained intact. For the first time in ages, she no longer perceived a stranger. Instead, she recognized someone making an effort. I wish I could trust you, she said. Then let me earn it, he replied. It was a simple statement, lacking in flourish. There were no grand declarations or passionate displays. Just two individuals, in the stillness following the chaos, attempting to gather the remnants of what could have been, what still might unfold. For the first time since they had settled into that booth, Walter sensed a delicate glimmer of hope, as if a door had creaked open just wide enough for a sliver of light to seep in. For Sarah, the burden she had borne in solitude for so long seemed to lift, if only slightly. The next morning ushered in a tranquility she hadn't known in years. It was not the tense quiet of chilly mornings on street corners or the hushed calm of a shelter corridor before the break of day. This was a unique kind of stillness, enveloping her in warmth and tranquility, devoid of the usual anxiety that accompanied the dawn. She gradually opened her eyes and sat up, her gaze adjusting to the gentle glow of the hotel room, where the heavy curtains shielded her from the bustling city outside. The twins lay peacefully beside her, entwined as they often did, yet for the first time in a long while, they were not trembling. The night before had slipped away in a haze. Walter had been adamant about securing them a place to rest that wasn't a bench or a cramped cot in a bustling shelter. Initially, Sarah had declined out of habit, out of instinct, but the girls were weary and the proposal too genuine to dismiss. Walter opted for a simple, unpretentious hotel, just a short walk away. He settled the bill in cash, ensuring a discreet departure. He assured her he would return in the morning with breakfast, refraining from any further demands. It was the first time in years that a man had offered help without expectation. As the girls slowly stirred awake, blinking and rubbing their eyes, Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Lily sat up and looked around, confusion on her face melting into wonder as she realized they were still in the warm room. Sky, partially hidden beneath the covers, murmured something about pancakes, prompting a soft chuckle from Sarah. Their wait was brief. Precisely at 8 a.m., a gentle knock echoed at the door. Sarah moved cautiously, her wariness lingering, and opened the door to reveal Walter holding a paper tray filled with breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit, and 2 small boxes of chocolate milk. He appeared uncertain, as if questioning his welcome. Good morning, he said quietly. Hope I'm not too early. Sarah moved aside and welcomed him in. You're right on schedule. The girls beamed at the sight of him, even if they were unsure of his identity. To them, he was simply the kind man who treated them to meals and brought a smile to their mother's face. A rare occurrence lately. Walter perched on the edge of the armchair while the girls eagerly enjoyed their breakfast at the little table by the window. He refrained from exerting any influence over the moment, choosing instead to observe, listen, and remain patient. Once they finished their meal, he suggested accompanying them to shop for clothes. Sarah began to decline, familiar instincts cautioning her, but Walter interjected softly. I understand this is overwhelming. I recognize that you may not want to perceive it as accepting charity. However, they require proper boots, genuine coats, gloves. Allow me to take this on, Sarah. It's not about trying to earn my place. It's because I have a stake in this as well. She paused for a moment, then agreed with a nod. Not due to complete trust, but because she recognized the truth in his words. The day unfolded in small, everyday instances that carried an air of the remarkable. A visit to a department store where the girls donned winter jackets, laughing as the sleeves hung far too long. Sky picked out a pair of sparkly sneakers, her determination evident as she refused to part with them even at the checkout counter. Lily enveloped herself in a soft pink scarf, twirling with the grace she had admired on television. Meanwhile, Sarah lingered beside them, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Walter never loomed, never made her feel like an outsider in his realm. He simply existed alongside them, reliable and considerate. Later, he proposed they visit a quaint pediatric clinic he held in high regard. The girls had gone without a doctor's visit for more than a year. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety at the thought, concerned about the expenses, yet Walter had taken care of everything discreetly. The nurses were gentle, and the appointments went off without a hitch. The girls appeared healthy, albeit underweight. Sarah occupied a corner of the exam room, observing Walter as he held Lily's hand during her flu shot, and an internal change stirred within her. He wasn't acting. He wasn't fulfilling a requirement. He was present in a manner that was undeniably genuine. By the time evening arrived, Sarah felt as though she had experienced 3 days in a single one. Upon their return to the hotel, the girls were drowsy once more, resting their heads on each other's shoulders in the back seat of the car Walter had rented for the day. With his assistance, Sarah carried them upstairs one by one, tucked them in, and then stood by the window while Walter remained by the door. "I don't know what comes next," she confessed, her arms crossed gently over her chest. "I feel lost in all of this." "You don't have to," Walter said. "Not by yourself. We'll find a way. Just take it one day at a time." Sarah turned to look at him. She harbored lingering doubt, a sturdy barrier that resisted easy dismantling. Yet beyond that barrier, a fragment of her yearned to trust him. Not solely for her own sake, but for the sake of the girls. "Tomorrow," she said at last. "You can return tomorrow." Walter smiled. "I'll be here." As he departed and she shut the door, Sarah pressed her forehead against it for a moment, breathing out slowly. The burden of the past still rested heavily on her shoulders. Yet for the first time in a long while, the future seemed less daunting. Not due to every issue being resolved, but because another had stepped up to share the burden. In the weeks that ensued, a delicate yet consistent pattern started to emerge. It wasn't flawless, and there were instances when Sarah sensed the ground beneath her could tremble once more. But something genuine was forming, something she hadn't dared to wish for in ages. Walter arrived each day, consistently early and unfailingly patient. Occasionally, he brought breakfast or books for the girls. Other times, he came with nothing but his undivided attention. It was this presence, more than anything else, that started to smooth the years of tough barriers Sarah had built to shield herself. The twins adapted more quickly than she had anticipated. Lily was inquisitive, brimming with questions, and constantly observing Walter with her keen, attentive gaze. Skye, on the other hand, was more reserved, initially holding on a little tighter to Sarah. However, she too started to warm up, particularly after Walter allowed her to assist in steering the shopping cart during a grocery run one afternoon, praising her as the finest navigator he had ever encountered. Unbeknownst to them, he was their father. Sarah had requested that he hold off, allowing them time to acclimate to his presence before revealing such a monumental truth. He consented without a moment's doubt. He didn't impose. He simply arrived, day after day, demonstrating his worth in subtle manners. One morning, as snow lightly coated the sidewalks and the city bustled in its typical frantic rhythm, Sarah found herself outside a modest design firm just off Lexington Avenue. Her fingers clutched the handle of her worn leather portfolio, a relic she hadn't touched in years. Within it lay sketches crafted in the muted glow of borrowed spaces and basement shelters, creations she believed would remain unseen. Yet Walter had discovered them. One night, while the girls slept, he stumbled upon her sketchpad and was rendered speechless as he turned the pages. "You're incredible," he had said, his voice betraying genuine admiration. Now, as she stood before the firm, a wave of nerves washed over her, more intense than she had felt in years. It had been ages since she viewed herself as anything beyond a mother navigating the challenges of daily life. Yet, as she stepped through the door, portfolio held tightly against her chest, she confidently introduced herself to the woman at the front desk. The interview unfolded for more than an hour. The firm's lead architect, a kind man in his 50s, examined her work with care, posed insightful questions, and ultimately extended a part-time position to her on the spot. Sarah exited the building in a daze, stepping into the brisk sunlight with her heart racing, not from fear, but from the new sensation of hope. Walter awaited her outside, holding 2 coffees, oblivious to the momentous event that had just unfolded. The moment he caught sight of her expression, a grin spread across his face. "You got it, didn't you?" he inquired. She nodded, struggling to hold back her smile. "Monday marks the beginning." He offered her a coffee and enveloped her in a swift, firm embrace. She remained in his hold. The afternoon unfolded at a nearby park, where the girls frolicked through the snow in their new boots, crafting lopsided snow angels and erupting in laughter that drew smiles from passers-by. Meanwhile, Sarah and Walter sat on a bench, a silent connection deepening between them. "They're incredible," he remarked, his gaze fixed on the girls. "They're resilient," Sarah responded. "More resilient than they ought to be." "You shaped them into who they are," he said softly. "You protected them." She remained silent, yet his words lingered in her mind. The following days passed swiftly. Sarah began her job, and for the first time in years, she rediscovered her identity, not merely as a mother or a survivor, but as a creator, a contributor. She returned home weary, yet it was a fulfilling kind of weariness. Walter had secured a temporary apartment in the vicinity, allowing him to assist with the girls while maintaining a respectful distance. He drove them to school, prepared their lunches, and even lent a hand with math homework, which Sky enthusiastically declared was much more enjoyable with him there. The girls started referring to him as Mr. W. But it was Lily who, one morning at the breakfast table, turned to Sarah and inquired if he would be around forever. Sarah paused before responding. She glanced at Walter, who halted mid-sip of his coffee, observing her intently. "I think so," Sarah finally replied. Walter smiled, yet there was an undercurrent to it, something more profound lurking beneath the surface. Later that night, as the girls drifted into slumber, he leaned in and asked her softly, "When do we share the news?" Sarah gazed at her daughters, their breaths gentle and rhythmic, their expressions serene. Memories flooded her mind of countless nights spent cradling them, murmuring vows that felt uncertain. Then her eyes met Walter's, and for the first time, a sense of courage washed over her regarding the future. Before long, she remarked, "When the time is right, when we are prepared." For the first time since their paths had intertwined once more, she genuinely felt they would be. The wind on the rooftop was soft, the kind that whispered of spring. A gentle breeze suggesting winter had finally relinquished its grasp. Below, the city sprawled in every direction, shimmering in the late afternoon light, vibrant with movement, sound, and hue. Yet in this place, there was a profound silence, a stillness that felt as if time itself had come to a halt for something revered. The rooftop garden, though modest in size, exuded a charm that lay in its unpretentious beauty. Delicate strings of lights danced above, while a semicircle of white chairs welcomed guests, all oriented towards a slender path adorned with potted wildflowers. The scene was serene, devoid of bustling photographers or the grandeur of an orchestra. A small gathering of friends, new colleagues, and a handful of familiar faces from Sarah's extensive journey stood together, radiating a serene happiness. Lily and Sky donned identical pale yellow dresses, each clutching a small basket of petals, a task they had approached with utmost seriousness throughout the morning. They had practiced their procession at least 10 times in the living room the previous night, each striving to surpass the other in elegance and accuracy, until laughter erupted and Sarah had to plead with them to settle down for the night. At the edge of the rooftop garden, they stood together, eyes bright and filled with pride, hands clasped tightly as they anticipated the music's cue. Walter positioned himself at the front, a mixture of nerves concealed behind a serene smile. Dressed in a simple navy suit without a tie, he exuded the quiet confidence he had cultivated over the past months. He had never been a man drawn to the spotlight, Yet today, he stood as if he had discovered his rightful place. His gaze was fixed on the door through which Sarah would come, holding within it all the words left unspoken and all the explanations that had become unnecessary. This transformation hadn't occurred in an instant. Their love didn't burst forth with grand gestures or loud proclamations. Instead, it gradually reformed in the gentle passage of time, through shared moments like packing school lunches, late-night conversations after the girls were asleep, and mutual support during life's challenges. Sarah found herself hesitating, uncertain about whether she could open her heart again, yet Walter remained patient, never pushing her to decide. He lingered, he attuned his ears, and he remained. The choice to reveal the truth to the girls had unfolded softly one evening during dinner. Walter had gathered them around the table and shared the news, his voice quivering just a bit as he disclosed that he was more than just Mr. W. He was, in fact, their father. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room as neither girl found the words to respond. Sarah held her breath. Then Lily asked if that meant he was going to live with them forever, and when he nodded, she simply said, "Good," and returned to her mashed potatoes. Sky took longer to open up, but in the weeks that followed, she gradually began calling him Dad. Initially only when she thought no one was listening, then out loud, clear and proud. As the melody filled the air, the girls glided down the aisle, petals drifting behind them like delicate confetti. They settled into their spots, sharing quiet giggles, and turned their gazes toward the entrance. Then Sarah emerged. She wore no designer gown. There was no dramatic veil or runway makeup. Her dress was simple, cream-colored silk with lace at the sleeves. Her hair cascaded down, loose and softly curled at the ends, with a single small clip keeping it away from her face. To Walter, she seemed like a vision from a dream he hadn't known he was dreaming for years. She was not merely beautiful. She was complete, unwavering, and luminous. Every challenge she faced, every mark life had etched upon her, only served to enhance her brilliance. She moved deliberately, not from anxiety, but as if savoring each moment. Each stride toward him felt like a departure from the shadows of her history, from the nights filled with longing and dread, from the quiet of unresolved mysteries. When she finally found him, their hands intertwined and her gaze locked with his, it felt as if the years spent apart had no bearing on the purity of this moment. The ceremony was brief and sincere, devoid of grandiose promises or borrowed verses. They expressed themselves in unique ways, addressing one another and the girls. Walter vowed not only to cherish Sarah but also to safeguard and respect the family they had formed. Sarah shared her thoughts on forgiveness, personal growth, and the enduring love that withstands silence and separation. She vowed not to offer perfection, but rather her unwavering presence. When the girls were asked if they welcomed Walter as their forever dad, their enthusiastic, synchronized nods elicited soft laughter mixed with tears from the small crowd. Once it was over, once they were declared husband and wife, there was no raucous cheering, no blaring music. Only soft applause, the soothing whisper of the breeze, and two small girls dashing into their parents' embrace. They lingered on the rooftop as the sun dipped below the horizon, its warm glow enveloping them like a cherished gift. There was a feast, joy, and tales exchanged beneath the twinkling lights. After years of uncertainty, Sarah experienced a feeling she had longed for but never truly believed she could attain. Peace. Not the fleeting variety that could vanish in an instant, but the sturdy kind that is cultivated gradually, day by day, with a partner who remains steadfast even in challenging times. As darkness enveloped the city and the girls nestled beside them, surrendering to sleep, Walter leaned in and softly murmured, "We made it." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, their fingers intertwined, and softly replied, "We're just getting started." Deep within her, in the place where all the pain had once resided, something fresh had begun to grow. Something radiant, something enduring, something known as home. This narrative transcends the tale of a wealthy individual rediscovering his estranged offspring or a woman overcoming insurmountable challenges. It's the subtle resilience required to persevere in solitude, and the bravery needed to embrace vulnerability once more after life has attempted to shield the heart. Walter and Sarah didn't receive a storybook ending. Instead, they forged something deeper. A love reconstructed through deliberate choices rather than mere luck. A family created not from flawlessness, but from unwavering determination. And perhaps that's the most profound kind of conclusion, not one where everything is effortlessly resolved, but where two individuals marked and authentic opt to begin anew, side by side. In a world that frequently rushes past the essence of what truly counts, their narrative serves as a reminder that occasionally, the most transformative moments arise when we pause, observe, and choose to invest our hearts.